Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, and that's New Comic Book Day, and I was out and about today. It's not as often a thing that I go out and about, but today is the calm before the storm. This big, messy, sloppy winter storm that has been inching its way east across the country is about to strike Boston. And it looks like, from the latest weather forecast, it looks like here anyway, it's going to be that horrible mixture of sleet and rain with a little bit of snowy glop thrown in, so not pretty at all. So I did a lot of errands today, more than was good for me, because I don't plan on stirring out of doors tomorrow, except when Frida needs to. And once she sees what the weather is like, if it is bad, she won't need to do much. She doesn't. She dislikes it more than I do. But since I was out and about, and since there's a comic book store relatively on my route, and since it's New Comic Book Day, I went to the comic shop. The comic shop, my LCS, my local comic shop, is a branch of Newbury Comics, which is an East Coast of the United States type chain that has lots of stores, and that mostly deals in tchotchkes and vinyl and themed socks and Trump toilet paper and that sort of thing. It's a student type store, but there is a despised and tiny section for comic books way in the back in my store on the second floor. And there's a good clerk who runs it. The kid who runs the comics knows comics and really likes them and knows what he has. He understands what he has, not just the new releases, but the whole collection of graphic novels and hardcovers and paperbacks and whatnot, which is, I admit, the main thing that I go to comic shops for. I don't go anymore for the floppy weekly issues because there's almost nothing that appeals to me. Even today, spreading throughout the DC titles, the DC superhero titles. DC is the home of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. It's my favorite of the two comic book superhero publishers. The after effects are spreading out all through the DC universe of Brian Michael Bendis, the writer Brian Michael Bendis' decision to have Superman reveal his secret identity to the world. That's almost 100 years of continuity, and the corporate suits at Paramount were approached by this weird writer, and he very strongly said, look, here are my 100 reasons to do it, but mainly you'll do it or I'll just leave. I'll be bored if I don't get to have my way. And they don't care about comics, so they said, sure, yeah, we don't care. We'll do whatever we want in the movies, and that's where the money is, so we don't care what you do in the funny books. Instead of even one person in that boardroom saying, no, or Brian Michael Bendis' editor saying, no, you can't change any fundamental pillars of this character. You can't do it. If you can't tell good, entertaining stories without doing that, then get lost and we'll find somebody else to write Superman. Thanks. Nobody said that. Nobody did. Instead, they said, well, we don't care. Go ahead. So that is now the reality. That is now continuity in the DC line, is that Superman doesn't have a secret identity anymore. Superman, the whole world knows that Clark Kent is Superman and vice versa. Which interested Brian Michael Bendis for about 15 minutes. It was a shiny thing on the sidewalk. It interested him for about 15 minutes. I'd be willing to bet there was only one scene that he wanted to write and needed that in order to make it happen. No thought to consequences, no thought to long-term ramifications, and no thought to the fact that he won't be writing Superman in a year. Some other writer is going to have to clean up this mess. Of course, some other writer is going to have to do that. It isn't going to be just true from now on that Superman has no secret identity. Clark Kent and Superman, and the secret identity that links the two of them, is a vital part of the character. It's been true from the beginning, from Action Comics #1. So sooner or later, someone is going to have to clean up this mess and bring it back to normal. And we've already seen in Marvel Comics, the home of X-Men and Spider-Man and whatnot, we've already seen a version of this kind of thing because a writer at Marvel Comics was allowed to do the same thing. Was told the executives at Marvel Comics, well, let me do whatever the heck I want with these characters and their 50 years of continuity, or me and my bag of cocaine will go home. And they were told, yeah, go ahead and do it. So they had Peter Parker reveal on national television that he is Spider-Man. The reason why Peter Parker from the 1960s had not done that, had kept his identity secret, was so that his enemies would not immediately target his vulnerable loved ones. And of course, the minute he did it in that storyline, his enemies targeted his loved ones. And in order to save the day, in order to restore, in order to unring that bell and save the day, he made a literal deal with the devil. I will give you the love of my life. I will give you my relationship with my wife and all memory of it if you change the world's memory and everyone in it so that no one remembers that I did that. And it's a horrible thing. Horrible. It's not a fix at all. It's a silly Frankenstein patch on a stupid idea that some editor should have squashed right at the beginning. And it's all happening all over again. Some writer down the line is going to have to come up with a way to make this story not true. But in the meantime, it is true, and it's affecting, for instance, Lois Lane. Lois Lane, the character Lois Lane, is having a 12-issue miniseries that I have been really enjoying. I've been really enjoying it. And the whole plot line there about a dead Russian journalist has been hijacked by the fact that the whole world now knows that Lois Lane is Superman's wife. And so the latest issue of Lois Lane was at the comic shop today. I didn't bother with it. It's a terrible shame. I've been really enjoying it, but I don't want to participate in that stupid storyline. I want to wait for it all to be over with. Writers do this. They come along and they do this. And if they have a big enough cachet at cons, if they have a big enough ego, they get away with it. So you have a Superman who wears a t-shirt and doesn't fly. Okay, great. So we'll just wait you out. We'll just wait it out. So when I go to comic shops, when I go to Newbury Comics, I tend to look at the remainder section and the graphic novel section to see what might be of interest there. And there was something today, only $20. And a real find, something that I'm going to go back to over and over again. And that's this, the DC Universe by John Byrne. John Byrne is a fan favorite writer and artist. He became very famous on the X-Men. He did Iron Fist and Captain America and the Fantastic Four and a whole bunch of other stuff. Doesn't do superhero comics anymore. And was mostly associated with Marvel. Until he was fired. Until he was fired from Marvel. The official story doesn't tell you, but in reality, he was writing and drawing a Canadian super team called Alpha Flight. And in one issue of Alpha Flight, keep in mind we're talking 25 pages. That was at the time I think $3, something like that. In one issue of Alpha Flight, he had one of the characters, Snowbird, who is a white costume, a white tiara, white wings, fight a similarly white themed villain in a snowstorm. And for 6 pages, it was just the page panel breakdowns and white with sound effects. Pow, Zammy, Zala. He's literally selling comic book fans blank pages. And somehow got it through his sub-editor. And when the group editor saw it, the group editor said, well, we have absolutely no case if anybody wants their money back. Oh, and also, you're fired. So it might have something to do with maybe John Byrne is the ultimate in the kind of prima donna that I'm talking about. But over the course of time, he did do a lot of artwork for DC, including a miniseries called Legends that this actual cover comes from. People who don't know anything about comics are going to look at this cover and say, okay, well, I recognize Batman and Captain Marvel, and I recognize The Flash and Wonder Woman, but why is there a bird in the middle of the cover? It's a long story. But in addition to that miniseries and a bunch of other stuff, John Byrne also did occasional covers, and he did backup and one-shot features on and off for decades at DC Comics, and this collects them. I have a lot of those standalone things. One of them was a slim, very early graphic novel, probably number 10, probably like the 10th graphic novel to be published, that was a Batman adventure drawn by John Byrne and formatted for 3D. The graphic novel actually came with 3D glasses. And this reprints it. It reprints it in simple black and white, so you don't get the 3D effect. But I never thought that would be printed in any way. Also, there was a one-shot for Green Lantern. That is a Green Lantern. That is not the Green Lantern that's most famous to you. But there was a one-shot called Ganthet's Tale that was about the Green Lantern Corps. It was about the Guardians of Oa. And it was written by Larry Niven, the science fiction author Larry Niven, or at least he oversaw the story. He might not have written the nuts and bolts. And there are plenty of other things in here, including some that I haven't seen. Backups and little features. There's a what if type story of if Superman existed in colonial America. And I didn't know that this volume existed. This has got to be old, because uh, this has to be old. But I didn't know that it existed. So and it collects a lot of the things that I have rotting away in single issues, and a bunch of stuff that I haven't read. So that's always a treat. Like, for instance, there's an Enemy Ace story that John Byrne draws in the manner of Joe Kubert. He doesn't draw it like this. He draws it like Joe Kubert. And there's another one where he draws a Batman adventure in the style of the animated series. So if you didn't have his name on it, you wouldn't know that it was John Byrne, unless maybe a John Byrne real fanatic might recognize his paneling, because John Byrne is a really good draftsman. He's really good at paneling. He can make a comic book exciting by the way he organizes it, even without action sequences. So it was a pleasure to get this. I will go through it, and I will keep it. Although I'm noticing that there's an artwork on the naked cover. Oh, there is. Oh, wow. This is the back naked cover, and this is the front. Look at that. Okay, great. I didn't notice that. All right. So that was great to get this at the comic shop. But while I was there, and since the clerk was there and he was chatty as ever, we were having a great time talking to each other, I went and looked at the single issues, at the new releases for Wednesday. And I saw the Lois Lane that I wasn't going to get, and I saw a bunch of other stuff. Oh my God, there was shelf after shelf after shelf of Marvel comics. I've heard all about Marvel's strategy of flooding the shelves, where they come out with 40 issues every week or something like that. You can only imagine what Marvel fanatics must do if they have to buy all that crap. I looked at it all and wasn't interested in any of it. I confess, not all of that is the sloppy state of current comics. I've never been all that interested in Marvel comics. I will read them, of course, but I don't want my heroes to have feet of clay. And I don't want them to be struggling with power levels. Oh, no, can I lift this or not? Please. I know all the Marvel fanboys love that moment in Steve Ditko's Spider-Man, where Spider-Man is buried under a gigantic metal weight and he's summoning the inner strength to throw it off, and then suddenly I am a man. I know Marvel fanboys just love that sequence. Just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. A Kryptonian could knock it off with a pinky, and they should. Anyway, I went through the new DC issues, and I found two that I was willing to take a chance on. Not a small chance. These are $4 a piece. Comic books are $4 a piece now. And that's a crapshoot, because you don't know what you're going to get. But I tried. I took a gamble, and I am so glad I did, because they were both great. The first one is Young Justice. And this is written by the aforementioned Brian Michael Bendis. I'm not going to hold that against him. Maybe I think that he would be perfect on smaller titles like this, characters that nobody can name and that nobody's going to care about if he does lots of weird stuff with them. I think he'd be fine there, because he's kind of, sort of a good writer. The only main problem I have with him, when he's not desecrating great characters that he has no right to desecrate, they are not his. My main problem with him when he's not doing that is that he doesn't stick around. So he's an elaborate dreamer. He dreams big plot lines, but you know perfectly well that some pinch-hitting writer is going to write the last 2 or 3 or 4 chapters of that big idea, because he'll have moved on. This is Young Justice. And the clerk at the comic shop said that Wonder Comics is sort of a Brian Michael Bendis project. I have to read up on it. I don't know much about it at all. But this, some of you old-time comic book fans will see, the title on the cover is A Warlord Is Reborn. And some of you are going to recognize that type font, because, yes, indeed, this stars Warlord, a character who in a fantasy land named Skartaris, that was created and drawn immortally by the artist Mike Grell. And I saw the famous headset there, and that type font, that's what Warlord's type font was like. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? So Superboy, this character, Superboy, goes to Skartaris. I wonder if he meets Warlord, who is there, and he does. He meets Warlord in this issue. And then I got something amazing. All of Warlord tells his story. He tells the story of his time in Skartaris and all the people that he's met and all the adventures that he's had. And his flashbacks are drawn by Mike Grell. This issue has page after page of original Mike Grell Warlord artwork. You comic book fans, the long time comic book fans of a certain vintage, are going to be squealing at that, and as well you should. I think that's just amazing. This is a legendary thing for Mike Grell to return to this character that he made legendary. That's just fantastic. And the plot line is split between that. Superboy is in Skartaris, but the whole of the Young Justice team is in the present day, wondering where Superboy is and trying to save him. And these are a lot of characters that I don't know. I recognize Wonder Girl, the modern Wonder Girl, and I recognize Impulse, sort of a younger version of Kid Flash. And of course, since I love the cartoon Super Friends, I recognize these two. I had to ask the clerk at the comic shop. I said, I know you're going to think I'm drunk in the middle of the day, but that looks like the Wonder Twins from Super Friends. Turns out it is. It is them. They are apparently been revived. There are a whole bunch of other characters too, and this is Tim Drake, but he is not Robin. His code name is now Drake. So there's a lot here that I didn't understand, but I loved the issue. It's so good. It was so good. You've got Mike Grell doing the flashbacks of Warlord's history in Skartaris. Then you have a different artist doing Superboy in Skartaris with Warlord. And then you have a third artist doing the present day stuff for the Young Justice team. So that was a bonanza. And then when I go back to the comic shop, I am definitely going to get the next issue here. This is here, let me get to the right page. This book has been going on forever because this is issue number 13. So this has been going on for a year without me knowing anything about it. But this issue is a storyline called Warlords, Part 1. So I will definitely be on board for the rest of this story, for the rest of Warlords. So that was a gamble that paid off. And my other gamble also paid off. I went from Young Justice to grown-up Justice to the Justice League. And this is also the first part of a story. This is the first part of a story called Impact. It's written by Rob Venditti and drawn by Doug Mahnke, Mahnke, and it's great. Just fantastic. Just fantastic. A stranger falls to Earth, and a core group of Justice League members goes to see who he is. You've got Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and John Stewart, Green Lantern, who is, I think I'm probably in the majority here when I say that the John Stewart Green Lantern is everybody's favorite Green Lantern. And, I mean, Hal Jordan is the Green Lantern. He is the test pilot. He is the normal Green Lantern. But everybody likes John Stewart's Green Lantern better, mainly because of the epic Justice League cartoon. If you're a comic book fan and you have not seen the Justice League cartoon, correct that, because it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And they made the wise decision when they were casting the Justice League cartoon. They tried to figure, okay, unlike the comic book, we're not going to change the roster here. We want 7 characters, and who are they going to be? Well, you have Wonder Woman, but we want another woman. And so they chose Hawkgirl, and without Hawkman, which was a great decision. She's not just an appendage, she's a law officer on her own. So they had Hawkgirl, but they had Green Lantern, and they decided very wisely to have John Stewart as the team's Green Lantern instead of Hal Jordan, and it worked perfectly. Oh my God, the voice actor they got. But anyway, the character who falls to Earth turns out to have superpowers. He is a Daxamite. Those of you who are not up on your comic books, the planet Daxam in DC continuity is full of characters who, when they are transported underneath the yellow sun, they gain Kryptonian-level superpowers. Flight, super speed, invulnerability, heat vision, super strength. They are vulnerable to lead in the atmosphere, but if you can fix that, you can have a Daxamite who is basically as powerful as Superman, only without kryptonite being a weakness. The most famous Daxamite of them all, of course, is Mon-El, one of the most powerful members of the Legion of Superheroes in the 30th century. But this is taking place very much in the 20th century, or the 21st century. And the Daxamite who comes to Earth is named Sodam Yat, who has a long history in DC Comics. It was created by Alan Moore, if I remember correctly, or Denny O'Neil, one of those two. But he was a member of the Green Lantern Corps, just like John Stewart. So John Stewart is able to tell his teammates, no, he's acting a little weird, but he's not a bad guy. And when he calms down, Sodam Yat explains to them that a new breed of Daxamites has been weaponized by a character called the Eradicator, who is a longtime Superman villain. He was introduced in that is the Eradicator. As Flash says in this issue, his name's Eradicator. He's definitely a villain. The Eradicator was introduced in the Death of Superman. He was one of the four characters who appeared along with Superboy. It was one of the four characters who appeared and pretended to be Superman for a while, but he turned out to be a villain. And Sodam-Yat tells the Justice League that the Eradicator has created a phalanx of Daxamite warriors and is intending to use them to invade Earth. Not only because Earth's yellow sun will give those Daxamites superpowers, but also because Earth is the home to Superman, the one person that the Eradicator feels could get in his way. And sure enough, at the end of the issue it cuts off way early because there's a backup feature that isn't announced on the cover and that really ought not to be here. The end has the Eradicator with an army of Daxamites facing the team, minus Batman, who has gone off to London to enlist the aid of Madame Xanadu, a sorceress, because at the beginning of the issue, when the team is talking to Sodam-Yat and figuring out what they're going to do, they ask him if he'll join them, and he says no. He's a political isolationist now. He doesn't want anything to do with the outside world. Doesn't want Daxamites to have anything to do with the outside world. They're too dangerous. So even if fighting, as he says, fighting his on the side of the Justice League would be a violation of everything that he holds sacred. I think it's probably true that he will end up fighting them by the end of the storyline. But they rule him out, and of course Daxamites aren't vulnerable to kryptonite, which means you have to figure out what are they vulnerable to. So they ask Superman, what else do you hate? So the Superman character says, well, I try not to hate anything, but I'm not all that fond of magic. And this also is very old in DC continuity. In DC continuity, Superman is typically told that he is vulnerable to magic and kryptonite, which has always confused me a bit, because everybody's vulnerable to magic. It's not just Superman. It's not like the Flash could laugh off a magic spell. Everybody's vulnerable to it. But the fact that he says it, and the fact that maybe he has an extra vulnerability to it, I've never seen that or understood any reason for it, leads Batman to London to seek out Madame Xanadu's help. And that leaves the rest of the team, the Flash, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, and Superman, facing the Eradicator and an army of Daxamites. And that's going to happen in the next issue. This is part one. I don't know how many. Does it say how many parts there will be? No, this is just part one. I got a kick out of the opening. Sodam-Yat comes to Earth. He falls to Earth in what we're told is rural Minnesota, like there's any other kind of Minnesota. But that final panel, the core of the Justice League facing off against the Eradicator and an army of Daxamites, raises a fantastic question. DC has actually done this once before, way before, probably when the writer and artist were little babies, or before that. DC had a short miniseries storyline in which Daxam invades Earth. And what do you do? And that has always been the big question, whether it's Daxamites or Kryptonians or whatever, and whether it's in the 20th century or in the 30th century with the Legion of Superheroes. The question is always, how many heroes do you have in the DC universe who can square off against a Kryptonian? How many do you have who can do that? Notice the cover is a little bit of a giveaway, because that character behind Wonder Woman is clearly Madame Xanadu. So at some point she's going to join. She's going to join in with the fight. In this issue, she doesn't quite, but she will. But you have to. That has always been a fascinating subject for me. What happens if that's true? It's a subject that Justice League, for instance, and also the Legion have skirted a little by having one Kryptonian go rogue. What would happen? What would the Justice League do if Superman turned against them? What would the Legion do if Superboy and Mon-El turned against it? What could they do? This is a whole phalanx of Superman-level characters. What happens then? Well, the Flash is useless. In this current continuity, the Flash, for a brief while, the Flash in DC was not only able to run super fast, but was also able to draw speed out of other beings, basically render them immobile. And this Flash clearly doesn't have that ability, and he can't vibrate inside Kryptonians, so he can't do anything like that, so he's worthless. Batman, with sufficient preparation, knowing what he's up against, probably could come up with something, but not against one Daxamite, yes. against a dozen? No. No. Uh, you start to thin the ranks pretty quick. A Green Lantern? A Green Lantern can hold his own against a Kryptonian, I would think. And Wonder Woman can if she's handled right. I'll be very interested to see if this author handles her correctly. One great piece of hope that I have is that when Sodamyat is still a little bit wonky and is lashing out with his heat vision, at one point he blasts Wonder Woman straight on. No magic bracelets, no shield, just blasts her with heat vision, and the next time we see her, she's fine. Which means that this writer at least understands that Wonder Woman is Superman, that she's Superman level power. She's not a WWE fighter with magic bracelets. She's as strong as Superman and invulnerable. I always love it. I always think back to one moment in a DC comic from years ago where she was blocking bullets with her bracelets, and a character says to her, I've never understood why you do that. Aren't you basically invulnerable? Why would you block bullets with your bracelets if you're basically invulnerable? And she turns to him and says, do you think I like getting shot? I love that. But yeah, if this writer understands Wonder Woman correctly, then yeah, she can hold her own against Kryptonians, and of course Superman can. But who else? Who else in the DC pantheon? Not Aquaman. Not any of the Batman family, Wonder Woman, the Huntress, or Catwoman, anything like that. None of them can. Maybe some of the Sorcerer characters. I imagine we'll see quite a few of those. The Alan Scott Green Lantern. Sure. But how many others? Not many. Captain Marvel. Possibly. if he's around, I have no idea who's available and who's not. I haven't dipped into a DC comic in a long time. If the team that we see at the end there, Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman, Superman, should be able to hold their own against a large group of Daxamites for a few minutes until they're just overwhelmed, until they're overwhelmed with numbers. Each one of them is powerful enough on their own, but it's great. This issue was fantastic. Lots of good character beats, terrific artwork. I loved it. I don't know what the obnoxious backup feature was doing. The same thing was here in Young Justice. I got 8 pages instead of the whole, but my gambles when it came to floppy issues turned out well. They turned out very well. In Justice League, there is one brief mention. John Stewart is talking with Clark Kent about his decision to reveal his secret identity to the world. It's not made a big deal out of, and I didn't like it, but it turns on a great piece of character writing, so it redeemed itself, because Superman says, let's see here, is it too much to hope that someday the people of the world will see me as a guy from Kansas and not as an alien from Krypton? And John Stewart says, you're asking the wrong guy. I was never one for a mask. I can't put my face to something. If I can't put my face to something, I shouldn't be doing it. Took guts telling the world who you are. Can't say any of us saw it coming. He tells Superman the battlefield is no place for egos. Superman says ego isn't the problem, trust is. And John Stewart says, you don't seem to have a problem with me calling the shots. And Superman says, what do I know? I'm just a guy from Kansas. That's terrific. That's just a simple nod in the direction of that John Stewart is in charge in the field. Fantastic. So those were my comic books today. It was a successful comic book day. They aren't always that way. This was so I got the John Byrne in the DC universe. This was a find, just delightful, because I'm not going to have to worry about those single issues, and I'm going to have a lot of stuff in here that I haven't seen, and that I'm not going to hunt out otherwise. A backup feature and an issue that I'm not otherwise interested in, no. And 2 floppy series that I am now going to read: Young Justice and Justice League. Young Justice is not the Teen Titans. They are the younger version of the Justice League, but they are not the Teen Titans. That's something else again. DC has a lot of teenage heroes, I guess. But anyway, that was my comic book day. It was more successful than I was expecting. So it stands to reason we will have a comic book day next Wednesday. So I will reconvene then. Thank you, BookTube.